So, thank you for being back here for the last mile of the very packed schedule that we had today. We will follow up with the presentation by David Arroyo Guardeño from the Spanish National Research Council, and the presentation is on T-based blockchain protocols for authentication, authorization, audit, and accountability. David, the floor is yours.
Again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, the second opportunity. I'm going to have a third one. Now I'm going to try to summarize what has been the core of two European projects, and also is part of an ongoing project, SPEARS project, Go IT project, and Qubit project. The first one is about how to construct root of trust at the silicon layer. This is something very critical. We are talking all the time about trust, but we need to have that at the very low level, at the hardware level. And in this project, SPEARS, secure platform for developing this root of trust at the silicon manufacturing process, we have a specific part related to the implementation of a trusted execution environment using open hardware. This is the connection with the other project I mentioned before, Go IT, where we are working in the promotion of open hardware in order to have trust fully implemented from point to point. This is something that it could seem very easy, but it's very complicated because we have a very complex supply chain. So here I am just going to try to summarize that in the context of how we can implement, for example, the EU directive, the one referred there, which is devoted to protect whistleblowers. This is just a use case I have considered in order to try to make the problem easy to understand, because it's very cryptographic, the thing I'm going to explain. Actually, crypto is for cryptography and not for cryptocurrency and all this kind of stuff. So me, as a cryptographer, this is something I try to repeat. And mainly we have the requirements from the directive, how we need to have specific channels in order to enable users with the capability of reporting not acceptable behavior, but also in the case of the interaction between the citizens and the different institutions. This is something that is mandatory from 1 year before, or more than 1 year before, but it's not implemented in most countries in Europe. And what I'm trying to link is how we have managed privacy protection in terms of the identity management in the project I have underlined before, and how this can be connected in order to provide privacy-respectful identity management. And blockchain is going to be used here in order to record the different events related to the procedure of generating identities and to the procedure related to the life cycle of these identities. No more than that. And this is very relevant. Actually, this is the core of this standard, here, which is a national standard. It's the only one standard that has been published about decentralized identity management, and which is now under the discussion of Sensenelec GTC 19 Working Group 1. It's the only one standard that is right now provided in order to have a decentralized identity management framework. And if you go there, you can see that in the end you are using DLTs just to record information related to the way you are generating identities, because identities are going to be generated as always. There is no key different there. And this is very relevant because the connection with the way you are protecting privacy by terms of identity management is very, very connected to the current implementation of the European regulation for identity management. There it is established you need to provide different procedures to have a selective disclosure of attributes. This is another topic that you can find everywhere. It's very easy to put it in the paper. It's almost impossible to implement it. It's like the right to be forgotten, for sure. But how are you going to do that? Okay? So we'll try to provide different resources in order to do that. We have applied that in the context of privacy-respectful e-voting. We have applied it also in order to have fair anonymous communications, in order to have a layer upon Tor, and to enable selective banning of users instead of banning the complete use of Tor. This is possible using advanced cryptographic means. And now, in the context of this project, we are conducting remote attestation of IoT devices based on RISC-V. With this remote attestation, we can conduct digital onboarding. With digital onboarding, we can conduct privacy-respectful identity management generation. Okay? So this is more or less the complete picture of the technological framework we need in order to have something very secure and according to the principle of privacy by default. This is another thing that we can find everywhere. Privacy by default and by design. Okay, how? You need technological means, you need regulation, and you need to be coherent with the business needs. In order to balance all of that, you have a challenge ahead, more than a challenge. Okay? And in order to properly implement not only the internal channel we need in order to have this whistleblowing protection, but also the external channel, we are going to deploy everything upon classical public infrastructure. Otherwise, we are not going to be compatible, and our solution is not going to be usable. And for such a goal, we are using the standard for managing this is the X509, which is a paper we have published about that, with an extension of the standard, and it is easy to be implemented. And actually, we have a library, a specific software library, in order to use the concrete, advanced cryptographic means we need in order to have this privacy-respectful identity management framework. And finally, we need to have a governance layer for those cases where we have anonymity protection, we have identity protection, to be more rigorous, but there are a lot of false allegations. It is possible to revoke those identities that previously have been handled in a privacy-respectful manner. Yes, it is possible, because there are specific anonymous identities that enable privacy-respectful traceability. And with this functionality, we can revoke anonymity. It's complex from a general point of view, but from the technical point of view, it's possible. Actually, it's part of a project that was conducted 20 years ago by Jan Kamenis called ABC for Trust. Nothing is new here. The only one problem we have is to have something that is easy to be adaptable to our systems, and in terms of software development, it is equivalent to have a software library. If you look for software libraries with privacy-respectful identity management, there are very few of them. Very few of them. That's the key problem. This is the key challenge when we are conducting that. Okay? So, yeah, as I mentioned before, the blockchain for us is going to be just a record where we are storing the different events, and in order to foster later auditability. And since we have the capability of revoking identity, anonymity, we have also the capability of conducting accountability procedures. That's the reason why we have the 4 A's. We can have an authorization procedure, an authentication procedure, an auditability procedure, and also an accountability procedure, just using this kind of functionality. Okay? And from a general point of view, we are going to have this kind of flow with the internal notification through the internal channel, and then we have an external authority which should be independent from that. In most cases, this notification channel has been conducted using a classical email server where the institution is saying to the users, okay, you can send me your allegations, I'm going to treat all of them in a confidential way. Okay, but this is not the core of the law. The core of the law is established that it is possible to establish a privacy protection from the very beginning, not privacy as control, but privacy by default. Okay, and okay, so basically this is the thing I have been mentioned before. In our case, what we are going to use is to map all these requirements and to use functional cryptography. Functional cryptography is a type of cryptography where we can conduct identity management in terms of some specific properties of the identity instead of considering the whole identity. For example, I need to verify the age of a user. I can do that without knowing which is the user behind a digital identity. I can use digital selection of attributes in order to validate authorization stages in our system. Okay, and but it's not enough with that approach. With that approach, we are protecting the identity, but when we are sending information, there is other information. There is additional metadata. For example, the way we write. For example, the point from which we are connecting to the institution. So when we are saying that we are protecting user's identity, we have to be aware that anonymity is something much more complex. Okay? So in our proposal, we are conducting content sanitization, and we are conducting also the transformation of the writing style in order to avoid to be identified like a user. For sure, we are somehow very weird in order to protect every single corner, but this is the spirit of the regulation. Okay, and the same with communication. We can conduct Tor communications, for example, in order to be sure that the institution doesn't know from which point we are connecting to the allegation. Okay. First, we need to register the identity, and this is going to be conducted according to the classical and standard digital onboarding procedures. In our case, we are going to leverage open hardware because it's something that endorses technological sovereignty. This is something that also we can read everywhere, but in the end, for example, we are using technology from other places and from other countries where our legislation is not applied. So this is something also very convoluted. This is the summary of all the different technologies we need to use in order to implement the whole architecture. We have the basic components here, how to design a system according to the properties of privacy by design and privacy by default. This is a paper from ourselves in 2014. Also, we have a specific library in order to have group signatures, providing traceability protection and linkability protection in order to have identity univocally identified, by the reiteration. We need to have traceability. We have to know all the operation conducted by an entity, and also linkability, the capability of knowing two operations and determining that both of them are corresponding to the same entity. If we only have linkability or traceability, we don't have the complete picture about a user. So we are protecting the privacy of the user in terms of linkability protection or in terms of traceability protection. So we can combine both, and we can have different combinations in order to have different solutions. And the only one problem is that in general there are not libraries providing this whole bunch of functionality. There you have one with a lot of at least as far as I remember, we have 7 different families of group signatures with different properties and different capabilities. Okay, so this is a contribution, at least we think is a very good contribution in order to properly foster the implementation by expert in cryptography of solutions that requires high skills in cryptography, because we have a lot of commitments about protecting very complex properties without a specific technological means in order to be achieved, in order to fulfill these requirements. So this is a big problem we have in general. And also it requires a reflection about that, because we have a lot of European projects implementing products related to this kind of library, but they are not accessible. There is not a proper control of the software after finishing the projects. So the reflection is, when we are doing a project, what is the goal of the project? The project itself, or to have an exploitation of the product related to the project? An important reflection as far as I'm concerned. Then we need to conduct proper generation distribution. Sorry, there is a word there in Spanish. This thing of mixing languages with a lot of presentation happens, this kind of problem. So this is a protocol in order to generate and distribute the privacy respectful identities. Then we have the proper implementation of the management of the privacy respectful identity management layer. And then we also can implement remote attestation to have identity of things. We can derive, for example, something something similar to biometrics, but from devices, and we can call that physimetrics. This is important. We are talking here about the smart contract, machine-to-machine procedures, how to derive an identity from a device. This is not complex. Then we have also the need to modify regulation in order to recognize this identity as a legal identity, because right now, identities are mainly related to natural persons. A legal entity must be a natural person. But we can think about modifications about that. Actually, there is a very intensive debate about that. And it's going to be even more complicated because in the coming future we are going to have autonomous cars, we are going to have different models of accountability and liability. And so we need to have at least the means in order to properly align the requirements coming from law with the needs of the business and the possibilities from the technological environment. Okay? So this is a complex scenario, but it's possible to be conducted. As an example, we have applied this kind of approach, for example, to conduct audits in smart grids, in order to conduct pen testing, to derive the different problems in our system, from that to have digital evidences that in the end are going to be shared with other partners of the consortium without enough level of trust. Because we don't have enough level of trust, we don't want to disclose our identity, and we are going to do everything in a privacy respectful way. Okay? We have implemented that here, and also in this paper we have applied the same approach to aircraft leasing. The aircraft leasing is a very complex and convoluted environment with a lot of different agents and with a lot of different laws, regulations. So it is possible to have the law and to write into code, when it's possible, a specific procedure that can be conducted in an automatic way. Not everything is going to be conducted in an automatic way, but because in the end we need human oracles. There is a very good sentence about that by Cassidy, a philosopher. He said technology in the configuration of in will configuration cannot be never the Lord but the servant. We should recall this kind of thing. We can use these means in order to achieve proper goals, and in the end there should be something human-centered. Sorry, but we have to deal with human beings. There is no other way to solve human problems. And also assisting, we have concrete implementations in the case of e-commerce platforms. We have prototypes where we are conducting privacy-respectful e-commerce, where you are going to enter in the system not with your identity, but with a pseudonymous identity. And if, for example, you want to receive specific promotions, you have to enable to have privacy-respectful traceability. Otherwise, the platform has not resource in order to know who is the one buying a set of articles, and then it is impossible to offer an offer because I don't know your profile. The thing is that I need to disjoin what is the trace from your profile, and this is possible. This is possible, and actually it is implemented in Caduceus in this system. And also, finally, we have FairTor. FairTor is a system where the breaches, in order to use Tor, you enter the system through a breach. Okay? In a lot of different scenarios, when you try to access to the service through Tor, you are going to be banned. because it is assumed that you are a bad guy because you are using Tor, okay? So instead of having this global filtering, it is possible to establish an additional privacy-respectful identity layer with fair anonymity. Fair anonymity means that it is possible to revoke anonymity, and if you detect that the privacy a pseudonymous identity is conducted illegitimate activities, you are going to ban this identity, okay? It doesn't mean you are going to know who is the identity behind that. You need a governance scheme with external auditors, a judge or something with capability to go further into the investigation, because it is possible to go further into the investigation. This is good in order to combine business goals with legal requirements and in terms of the technological possibilities. But for example, just as a minor comment, when you propose this kind of approaches to the people working in privacy enhancing technologies, they are going to reject it immediately because, yeah, you have a backdoor in the system. And now I'm going to finish here because I can stay more, but I think it's good to stay here. Because of that, we need a further reflection right now. We are implementing now at the European level age verification systems. Are we going to implement this age verification system? Are we totally sure that we are going to implement this age verification system with privacy by default? I'm not sure. That's all.
Up with our closing panel, that is, I think, handling private data. A lot of what you've been what you have addressed in your presentation. So to moderate that panel, I will call on stage Professor Heribert Hensinger from Hull University, and Jonathan Hype from Technische Universität Berlin, David, that is already here, and Eike Abe from IOTA. Heribert, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Last panel, handling private data. That's a huge topic, in my opinion. So I think we should start with a short presentation. Just a few sentences on the person, the vita, even if we know some of you. Eike, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Eike Haas. I'm with the IOTA Foundation, and I lead the digital identity efforts in the foundation. That means building SSI on top of our IOTA DLT. And yeah, this effort in the IOTA Foundation is about 3 to 4 years old, and I've taken the lead about 2 years ago.
Hello, my name is Jonathan. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at TU Berlin. I have been doing research in blockchains for the past 5 to 6 years, working very applied on different applications in different domains. We always consider blockchains as one part of a larger system, so we are very much interested in integrating it with cloud system and IoT and other stuff. With that, I have been focusing on the Oracle problem, but I have also been worked very intensively with zero-knowledge proofs and trusted execution environments in this blockchain space. I'm currently leading a publicly financed project on Socrates, which is a technology that is abstracts using ZK snarks in the context of Ethereum.
Okay, so this is David Arroyo again. I'm applied cryptographer, and yeah, the specific topic of my career in cryptography is privacy protection. Is the core of my research.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'm professor for business and taxation law, so that brings in the lawyer's perspective. And let's start with some clarifications on understandings and concepts, because I learned that nearly everyone understands different things under the concept of private data and privacy. So, Heike, what is private data for you? And under what conditions for you can privacy be presumed? For example, is pseudonymization sufficient, or would you expect more?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think like private data is well defined in terms of personally identifiable data and generally, I would say, critical data, right? We know about healthcare data, we know about data about political views and similar data, right? And that is highly protected, and that is very important in my personal opinion. But there's also private data in the space of business or governmental applications that are not directly protected under GDPR or not to the same extent, where I would classify as more like secret data, maybe, right? But I would say that falls under the same problems or challenges, right? Although you might not be obliged by law to keep that data off a DLT, you might want to, right? But on the other hand, the most private data is the data that nobody knows about. Right? So we are in a conflict where we want to have at least proofs over data or the data itself available to some persons without the overhead of having it to share with each of those individually, right, through technical means. So DLT is a very interesting tool to anchor the data or maybe even share the data, and it brings the whole problem of how do we secure the access to that data, or if we just commit to the data, for example, then it pushes the problem of sharing data and making it accessible off-chain, but doesn't solve it, right? Then we still are in the same situation of how do we give access then off-chain, even if we have commitments on-chain. And I think the strictest interpretation of regulation is, well, personal data and even the identifiers, TIDs, for example, in the SSI space, should remain off DLTs. Which is a very defensive approach, I would say. It's valid, right? But it also closes the door on interesting capabilities from a technology perspective, right? Because maybe we, as individuals, want to attest to something, and then it becomes much more complicated to do so if we don't have identifiers available. So private data, data that is sensitive, that we want to protect, but that is useful, right? Otherwise, it would not be, it might be data, but it might not be information, right? And we want to, the data that we are talking about, we want to use to some extent.
Jonathan, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think, so in large parts, definitely, and I think it's, in this context, especially interesting if this private or confidential data is used or required to execute some smart contract-based logic, right? And this introduces kind of a conflict of where you want to keep privacy, and at the same time you want to use the transparency guarantees of a blockchain. So for example, if you have a supply chain use case where companies trace products, digital product passports, something like that, you want to use the blockchain to overcome trust issues and have this information and functionality in smart contracts transparent and verifiable. But oftentimes you need to share, or these companies have do not want to share sensitive information about their business on the blockchain. And here you have this conflict that is kind of a barrier for many other applications as well on the blockchain, that you companies are too defensive or careful of really engaging into blockchains because they don't want to share this private data on the blockchain.
Yeah, David, I often work with companies and they don't only have a problem with personal data in the scope of the GDPR, but also with their business secrets. And they also have a problem with competition law because they are not allowed to share too much information about their business with competitors. So we try to get them on a consortial blockchain or something like that, and we can't do that. So should we have a more broad concept of private data then, or?
Yeah, private data is very complicated. Actually, when I am lecturing, not about privacy, but for example, in the case of this information, I always say, okay, in this very moment, privacy protection, the protection of your privacy is not a right, it's a requirement. Because if you don't protect the information you are managing, you are putting at risk also all the people related to you. This is related to what is private or not.
Yeah.
The way you are interacting with the systems is identifying you. The way you are accessing to data is identifying you. It doesn't matter the content. For example, in WhatsApp, you cannot access the content because you have end-to-end encryption. Okay, but I have your network connection. And I know how many times you are writing to a point. And this is very useful information. So in this very context, to decide, you know, this old chant about women rights protection, private problems are public and are of political interest. Right now, your privacy is of political interest, and it means that you have to extend that later. And related to right management is very complicated in a general scope, but take into account, for example, national security and how the different agencies can collaborate. They don't exchange information. If you we have a lot of data spaces, a lot of sandboxes, a lot of different proposals. When you have to implement a project, nobody's giving a piece of data. And you cannot do anything, especially when you are trying to collaborate with the law enforcement agencies. No, you can generate synthetic data. So what is the point of doing the project? If I can generate the data artificially, so what is the point? And we have a problem in terms of what is the specific trust environment we are dealing with. We have resources that can be used in order to have selective disclosure of information. It is possible to have, for example, the use of zero-knowledge proof in order to have for the sake of having verifiable computation and not to assess the complete set of data, just only partially. Or you can implement different solutions based on, okay, with a lot of problems, but you have now multi-party computation, you have homomorphic encryption. There are possibilities. And we need to deploy these trust data sharing bridges in order to have a business-to-business collaboration and a business-to-government collaboration. This is we need that in order to do interesting works and at the same time to protect ourselves, because information is necessary in order to protect us from the use of false information. We need information of high quality. If we don't have access to that, how are we going to evaluate the knowledge baseline?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But well, we have a problem to balance it, information, transparency, secrecy. But if there would be a technology that secures perfect privacy, so should we implement it? So we have a discussion. We had a discussion on Monero, and on a previous panel we heard that technology should be protected against prohibition, maybe also against regulation. But I'm not sure. Should technology protect privacy against all breaches under all conditions? Yeah? Or do we need, I call it, backdoors or some possibilities to enable the state to enforce some laws? Yeah? Because maybe people won't trust in the technology if it's only used for criminal things. So is Monero better than IOTA, Eike?
Regarding privacy-preserving transactions, definitely, yes.
Yeah, okay.
For sure, right? If transparency and traceability is a high concern, then Monero is not great, right, for that use case. But then many other public ledgers are better. Having the cake and eat it too is like having optional privacy in systems, like having optional privacy-preserving transactions, but that usually comes with a huge cost. And it might lead the protocol of technology in a place where it's neither one of each, right? So doubling down Monero style, saying everything is privacy-preserving by default, unstoppable to some extent, right? That is from the technology perspective, probably a more solid bet than trying to do it both. But I think an ideal system has a possibility for both. And an ideal system also has the possibility for sanctioned and well-known backdoors, if we call it that way. In another project that we engage in the IOTA Foundation regarding on-chain KYC systems, we call it identity on demand, very similar to what you described, right? Like there is a known backdoor that can be accessed by authenticated parties, which is an easy term to say, but a hard thing to actually implement, right? What that means, and it's socio-technical system at the end of the day, right? The authority is not a technical authority, but it is an authority from the real world that can be abused, right? But I think, yes, backdoors are probably essential for regulatory acceptance of certain aspects of a technology. I think privacy-preserving transactions are a requirement for acceptance from end users, to be honest, right? Because the analogy of getting access to your bank account statements because we sent a transaction once, which is the reality of blockchain, public ledgers, is unacceptable for personal use cases, I believe. I think unifying it in one technology might be interesting. Having dedicated technology for dedicated things might be the more reasonable approach from an engineering perspective. And if we leave the area of just plain value or asset transfers, transactions, right, and we go in the area of computation, things get even more complicated, right? Because in there, if we limit the data significantly, just talking about zero-knowledge computation, right, that means we only have proof statements. We never have actual data, right? And that means we can do less. Right? Maybe we can do enough interesting things with zero-knowledge proofs, but in other case we might want the whole data set, right? And how do we combine those requirements, right? And then selectively, in the truest sense, selectively disclosing the information becomes an interesting challenge for computation.
Okay, so Monero is not in every perspective better than IOTA, but that's a very personal question because
it's not scriptable, right?
Yeah.
Like it can do one thing very well, right? Which is transfer value privately. But if we talk about computation, smart contracts, there's no solution for this in Monero, as far as I'm aware.
Jonathan, what is your opinion on limitations of privacy for certain applications?
Yeah, if I may just add up on this, I think, yeah, as you said, like choosing your technology per application and per use case, I think is very useful. Then you don't have to implement things on an infrastructural level, on the consensus or wherever. And this is also what we did in our research on zero-knowledge proof. So just perhaps as a, I don't know, who knows zero-knowledge proofs in the audience? Perhaps we should give a bit of background that it's a kind of a verifiable computation technique where one prover can convince a verifier that a statement is true without revealing sensitive inputs. And you can do this in blockchains to realize verifiable off-chain computation. So you have privacy and scalability problems on the blockchain. So what you can do is you can outsource computations from the smart contract to an off-chain entity, then execute this computation, such as a token transaction or something like that, in zero knowledge off the blockchain, and only put the result of this computation on the smart contract where it is verified with a cryptographic proof, and you do not mitigate or reduce integrity guarantees of the blockchain. And if you do this on an application level, you can really good adjust to the privacy requirements of a specific applications, and this allows you then to, yeah, to execute or to do these proofs on private data, which are then never revealed on the blockchain. So one typical example to describe zero-knowledge proofs is that I have to prove that I'm over 18, and I just implement this in a zero-knowledge proof, and this can be a condition on the smart contract where this is verified without revealing my true age.
But that's not zero knowledge, or? Because I know if someone's under 18 or over 18. That's less knowledge, but not zero knowledge.
Exactly. So, well, zero knowledge here refers to the other aspects of the technology, but you're totally right. You have a range proof here, so it's not it discloses some information. It's actually a selective disclosure in that way. Yeah, so I would vote for using it on an application basis, and I'm a big fan of zero-knowledge proofs, but also trusted execution environments, which you can use in a similar fashion.
No, that's a critical point, because you need to design what is called, from a theoretical point of view, an adequate utility privacy model. Is this not possible to do that in general terms? Because privacy is mainly contextual, always. So, yeah, you can do it according to the needs of the concrete application context. And without a proper attack model, like always, you cannot be sure about what is the level of protection you are providing. Can be this related to your identity somehow in the future because somebody has an additional knowledge base? Yes. This is the problem, for example, that is conceptualized by the so-called differential privacy. What is the level of protection you are fulfilling? And this is very complicated. This was the framework until now, but from 2 years until this period, there is a lot of discussion about the convenience or that the accuracy of this theoretical framework.
Okay, so that sounds good. So we have to use that tool that is the most appropriate tool for the application. So let's put the tools on the table. He told us something about zero knowledge. Proofs, yeah. To me, that sounds a little bit like the goal of homomorphic encryption you mentioned. Yeah. So the person who works with the data don't have access to that content that it don't need for its decision. That's for me always it sounds like a good thing of homomorphic encryption. Are there other tools you would recommend for?
There are, taking into account, for example, identity protection. You have plenty of variety of different digital signatures, from group signatures, re-signature, threshold signatures, proxy signatures. All of them, they have specific models of privacy protection. So there you have, in terms of identity protection, you have a great variety of proposals. Actually, the last year in financial cryptography, which is one of the most relevant references in privacy protection, there were a paper just on having a unified framework to define cryptographic means to protect anonymity. So you have that resources. Then you have multi-party computation. It enables the capability of conducting computation between different agents and not having all the data on one agent. Multi-party computation in combination with homomorphic encryption. Homomorphic encryption is a type of encryption where you relax the semantic protection in order to have the capability of comparing data. You don't know the data, but you know that the piece of data is larger than another, for example. You can conduct that. There are a lot of proof of concept of that. There is a classical one called CryptDB, which was proposed by Raduca Popa and Serdovic. Serdovic is one of the one behind Zcash, which is one of the only few privacy respectful cryptocurrencies. Privacy by default. In Zcash, you cannot conduct traceability. It's like Monero, it's with a lot of problems. And also, you have zero-knowledge proof. And in zero-knowledge proof, you have a very great variety. From the traditional zero-knowledge proof to valid proofs, there is a lot of, according to your needs, you are going to select one of another. If you go to IoT, you have more restrictions, because in a device, it's not so easy to have zero-knowledge proof. But this is something that can explain better than me. But there are tools. The thing is that there are not easily accessible software libraries. And we should put the effort on that. You have cryptographic libraries in order to conduct encryption, and everything is very easy. But for that, you need to conduct ad hoc implementation. When you are working in cybersecurity and cryptography, you know that ad hoc implementation are the thing to be pushed forward in order to break the systems. because there is not a proper certification, product certification. And this is very, very important and very relevant.
And what would
Let
you
me
think?
just add one thing to this. I just want to underline the beauty of zero knowledge proof and secure that you have, like, I mean, these proof protocols that you mentioned, secure multi-party documentation, homomorphic encryption, they are amazing, but they are also very specific. And with zero knowledge proof and ZK SNARKs, you can actually execute arbitrary computation and convince someone in one message in a non-interactive fashion, which is distinguish these protocols and makes them very usable for different applications. Similar, by the way, I don't know if you would put them in the same class, but trusted execution environments with remote attestation can also be used for that, and they are even much more performant. However, they have a kind of a different trust model and security, hardware-based security instead of mathematical proofs.
Yeah, I would also like to extend on the list a little more. We have also selective disclosure without zero knowledge. Right, we can do selective disclosure zero knowledge backed with BBS plus signatures or something similar, CL signatures. But we can also do it naively hash based, which is what the IDAS recommended in the last iteration as DJWT, if you're familiar with it, which is lacking in my opinion. I think you were leading in it direction a little bit if we are comfortable doing age proofs with that state of the art. My answer would be no, I don't think so, they are not great. But it is a measure that works without using bleeding edge cryptography, right? So that should be considered. Pseudonymization, we talked about it already, it is a tool, right? Is it sufficient? The be all and end all? No, but it is a tool, right? Maintain multiple addresses, runtime address schemes that we had in the past in our technology, we ditched, by the way, but that is also a tool to preserve pseudonymity at least. And then conceptually, if we talk about SSI, keep a lot of stuff off-chain. It's right, not a technical solution, it's a procedural solution, but keeping the sensitive information between parties on a need-to-know basis, securing the communication channels, right? I like your view on the whole stack, right? It's not good enough to secure the registry or the storage, right? You also have to think about the transit of data. So even if we would agree on the single most sufficient technology for on-chain privacy or something, there's still a lot more that we need to consider, right? Entry points into the system, linkability is a big one, right? Where even if you do everything right on the credential level, but you introduce a revocation scheme that is linkable, then all was for nothing in the end, because you have a single linkable identifier, and that is what you also said, slips through at the end if you rush implementations, right? You do everything right by the book, but then you rush the revocation method, and then you're linkable in the end.
Can I add and the key component of all of that? If we don't do that with human-centered approaches, it doesn't matter the solutions you are implementing.
Oh, let's come back to that, because you mentioned that, I think the previous panel before, or one of the previous, you said always the human factor is the problem, always. So do we have possibilities to foster the technology so the human factor is not that important? So how do we get that risk controlled?
We have to put the people working in human-computer interfaces and the people working in UX, usability, which are very good at that. We have to put them in the circle. And for example, there is an approach from the people of cryptography called security ceremonies. In security ceremonies, you are devising every single stage in your protocols, taking into account the problems that in the past were discovered about the interaction of the user with some functionalities, some cryptographic functionalities. There are classical papers about the use of PGP, for example. Why Johnny can use PGP 5 years later. Why Johnny can still use PGP 10 years later. Jane cannot use PGP. And we are now talking about digital wallet, an irony. We are talking about how to protect our identity, but in a wallet. And we are talking about data economy. These kind of contradictions. But take into account that using a digital wallet with a complete set of privacy protection, in the end, is going to be referred to the use of an important set of cryptographic keys. Otherwise, you are going to be linkable. The people don't use only one pair of cryptographic keys. They don't use PGP. So now we are going to tell the people, okay, you have to use 10, and because it's useful. Because this is something you are listening all the time. SSI is going to be usable. You have to prove that. This is an assumption.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, let's talk a little bit further about people. When I told my friends in Ulm who are working with blockchain technologies from the companies, and luckily there are applications out there, that I'm going to moderate a panel on handling private data in blockchain environments. They said, that's no problem for us. We don't put any private data or secret data on the blockchain. Everything which should be secret is off-chain. So we only have a link, a hash or something on that. That's such an easy solution. That's enough for us. So how would you get ever all your good ideas that are better than off-chain solutions on the track? So because you have to sell it and you have to build trust on it. So I think that's a huge problem, and that's a problem of the human factor. So I should start with Jonathan, because he's a fan of zero-knowledge proofs. So how would you sell that so it could become a broad solution?
Yeah, so I totally understand your friends, right? I also have colleagues that are saying blockchain eventually will only be used to store hash pointers or like commitments that have some integrity, information about data stored off-chain, and zero-knowledge proofs that are comparable in the sense that they are a verified computation on some private data. And this combined allows you to keep data always private, use, however, certain properties of the blockchain to be accessible and so on. And also keep like a lot of load off the blockchain. And this then requires certainly that you, having this role of the blockchain, start designing your application and infrastructures on a layer 2 or off-chain even more carefully. And perhaps this is where we'll be ending up. So I don't say it's like a I think it's very realistic that blockchain will be used rather in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Sounds sensible. So, David, what could be the technology, in your opinion, that we will see first of all the others on the street, which could be a better success than off-chain solutions?
What type of application?
Yeah.
I don't know. When we are talking, for me, when the discussion was about having something enabling transparency, for me, to have the capability with the resource you can manage, you have to define the interface and the technological requirement for that. But for me, if we really want to promote the use of blockchain in order to have a better democracy, which is something very strong, we should try to foster fairness, transparency, and accountability. And transparency, for example, is something that we are listening a lot of time, but from my point of view, transparency has a lot of room for improvement. And this has to start with institutions. And when the institutions are transparent enough, and I think they are not transparent enough, sorry, you are fostering institutional trust. When you have institutional trust, it's easier to have technological trust. So we should start from the very beginning in order to have classical trust. And maybe when we are talking about algorithmic governance, it's good to talk to the people working in corporate governance, in social governance, and try to find a proper combination between what technology can do according to the classical way of organizing a complex situation. There was a panel before talking about what is new about blockchain in financial system, and about, I can't remember the name, there is nothing new. Yeah, there is nothing new. The same happened from the perspective of cryptographic application. There was a very famous paper by the people from Princeton called Bitcoin's Pedigree. On Bitcoin's pedigree. You go to this paper, I can't remember now where it was published, and you discover, okay, we have Merkle trees, a very old option. We have digital signatures, very old. We have consensus protocol, come on, we have a lot of implementation of consensus protocol, even in asynchronous systems. What was a very good contribution of Bitcoin? Putting all together and working. And make things, at least in the case of financial transaction, transparent. Transparency to have an application, a technology enabling an acceptable level of transparency. But for example, in public procurement, yeah, why not to have a high level of transparency? So I would vouch for something in that vein. And technology can help that. For example, it can help to the implementation of the so-called TOOP principle, the only one's principle. Okay, let's do that. Reduce bureaucracy. We can do it. How is not possible now to consult somebody diploma? And you don't need blockchain for that. You can do it with a lot of things. For sure, blockchain can make it easier if you have a proper, but this is something that can be solved. Why is not solved? It's not a technological problem.
Well, it sounds sensible, but we thought we could substitute trust in institutions through substitute in technology, and now you argue we need trust in institutions.
There is a classical, there is a book by Elizabeth Renieri. Elizabeth Renieri, she has a very good contribution in the field of trust and trustworthiness, because trustworthiness is not the same as trust. There is this classical motto by the Russians, is you trust, verify. You have a paper, something with the title, Trust in the Trustworthy. If trust means just dependency, it's not trust properly, strictly speaking. And she said, Elizabeth Renieri, please don't replace the myth of neutral law by the myth of neutral technology. This is something we should try to. We need law, and these laws should be discussed openly, and technology can help to properly implement these laws. But they are not going to replace that. We need that. Otherwise, we are going to have a street law, and street laws, strictly speaking, are not fair. This is something very well known. When you have something that is not flexible enough in order to have into account the context, you are going to have problems. I mean that because, I refer that because this is this classical, by Lawrence Lessing, code is law, and law is code. No, because code has bugs, because code is not the way you can represent the whole picture of the reality. You cannot assume as something perfect, for example, the closed wall assumption. Your database is expressing all the content of the external world. This is not true.
Yeah, but Lessing meant it different. For him, that was code is law and law is powered. So that he meant that. But Eike, you nodded on the arguments of David.
Yes. So maybe to give my twist on what you're saying regarding institutions, right? I would say the big selling point of DLT and blockchain technology is, of course, integrity, transparency, but programmability is a big sell. Right? Yes, we might not get rid of institutions, and we don't want to get rid of institutions in most cases, I would assume, right, fully. But we can automate and enshrine a lot of workings and laws under which those institutions should operate. Ultimately, there is a real-world equivalent, I assume, on many of those institutions that we create. We can also create purely on-chain unstoppable institutions. But in the end, if we want to interface with the real world at some point, right, there might be the necessity to attach it through backdoor or transparent control in an ideal world, right, to an institution. So yes, the claim closed world, everything will happen on-chain, our whole governance, nationality will just be a closed system that lives on a blockchain, likely not. But maybe we can encode 40% of it in code that is law, indeed, right? With checks and balances in the background. So more of, I would say, evolutionary approach on current systems instead of trying to tear everything down and rebuild it fully in a new world on chain. And I think that is a big sell, right? That's a sell also leading back to your opening, consortia chains and so on, right? That is not to be underestimated in less trustworthy or low trust environments, right? Where you have many counterparties that want to do business with each other. Not everybody has a personal relationship to everyone, right? And if you think in consortia chains, that means there's an almost infinite combination of consortia chains, right? For every possible combination of participants. If we can elevate that on something public, permissionless, with the right governance underneath that is at least to a large extent technical, that is already a huge win. Right? Do we get rid of all intermediaries? Probably not. Do we get rid of all institutions? Probably not. We shouldn't, I think, in many cases. Right? But we can automate a lot of it.
Yeah,
not
that's
all,
true.
But a lot.
Now, the master of the conference is sending signs and is threatening our discussion, but I think we should discuss one last big threat on privacy. Ali mentioned one panel before, and that impressed me. So he said the biggest threat of privacy is quantum technology, because it may be possible in 5 or 10 years to decrypt everything what is out there, because the blockchain, the huge ledger, is stored on millions of computers. So I really would be interested how we could handle that. So is there any idea on the panel?
Yeah. Take into account that there is a totally recognized problem right now as an attack called steal now, decrypt later. What do you mean that? I'm going to intercept all HTTP communications, all of them, and just for the sake of having this information in the future, when I can decrypt them. It's going to be a huge problem. It depends on the type of information you are intercepting. And in the case of HTTPS, we have implemented forward secrecy, what it means that if you are able to intercept a session, you cannot derive the other session. Okay, but if you can break all the sessions, you are going to set the whole batch of information. So what I mean is that the problem is in blockchain, but this is the least problem. The biggest problem is the intersection of all communications. This is the big, actually, for example, in the case of ransomware attacks, in the past, they were only getting into the system and encrypting everything, and that's all. Now they are intercepting all the communications, and they are storing just in case. Because maybe, for sure, a classic and a small attacker is not going to do that, but the states, the APTs, the advanced persistent threat, they are doing that because they have the resources.
Okay, so you have a short idea?
No, I just want to comment. This is I see that. I totally agree. But there's also like post-quantum security as a research perspective popping up, or is there already for I don't know 10 years or something like that. So I also have trust in security researchers to build systems that are post-quantum secure and
for the future, but not for the data that's in the world. That's the problem.
Well, there would have to be a lot of changes for existing systems and protocols.
Okay.
Definitely, this is a big threat. Yeah.
Okay. So the curtain should fall, I think, and all the questions. No.
Perhaps I have also a question to the panel, if I may. Are the current private data right now, today, with the digital lives that we are already living, secure with the technologies that are currently out there? Thinking of AI, of course, but thinking of all the private information that we are unconsciously transmitting identities to hotels, to actually for the value of faster check-in or something like that. And so we are thinking ahead, and of course this is a research and development forum, but are the current state of things secure? So that's a question I would love to ask. I actually thought of asking it before, but I didn't have the chance. So,
yeah, I think breach after breach shows that that is not the case, right? Like we see monthly breaches of huge customer databases revealing anything from credit card information to medical information. So I think the answer is very obviously no, right? But is the flight forward to just put everything on the chain good enough with quantum threats coming up, right? Encrypting it, putting it on the chain, and hoping nobody will harvest it, right, for later use? Probably also not, right? But I think we are moving in a good direction with application of SSI principles in a relatively controlled environment with still strong nation presence in terms of the IDAS, for example, right? Because this is relatively careful approach of keeping private data still off-chain and sharing it on a need-to-know basis according to certain technical and governance guidelines, right? I think this is a very real thing that we will see soon in all of our reality, at least in Europe, right? Which is way better than the status quo, but just full-on embracing everything that we can do with DLT might also expose us to huge problems in the future.
The thing is that, totally agree with has been underlined, but the thing is that if you are very aware about your privacy and you, for example, try to encrypt all the information and then you are putting in X now. I am encrypting the information using this and I do that every single day. There is a problem because you are making public something that it should not be public. I always use an example, for example, with the file robots.txt, which is something used in the websites in order to avoid the search engine to access your content. Okay, you are telling the search engine, please don't index my content. So why are you putting that there? Because if I am an attacker, we are looking in the robots.txt in order to get information. So sometimes we have a problem right now because we are exposing ourselves without being aware about the potential risk. So again, digital literacy and we need digital hygiene. And this is something that is related to how to educate people. And from a point of view, as a professor and as a teacher, as a trainer, we are not doing the best of ourselves in order to train the people in a good way of interacting with technologies. This is my perception. We are assuming that everything is going to be used in an easy way, and this is not the case. And we are not aware about the problems in general terms. Why I am always underlining that when you are protecting privacy, you are not protecting a right, but fulfilling an obligation. Because when you say to the, for example, usually I have seminars with teenagers, and they say, okay, what is the point? It's not a big deal that somebody access to my personal data. I am not relevant. So I use example, for example, of social engineering and disinformation campaigns. And all of them are organized using this irrelevant personal data in order to fake others. And now it's easier to fake others because you have a lot of different tools to conduct what we can call human spoofing. And this is one of the coming challenges. How to detect that somebody is somebody and not an artificial body. So it doesn't mean that we have to be all the time with a lot of fear. It doesn't mean we have to be aware of that.
Yeah, so true. We reached again the human factor.
Human factor.
And I think privacy literacy, security literacy, data literacy, that's important. And I think that's a lesson we should take home from that panel also. So I look at the clock and also on the schedule, and maybe the audience like to discuss all the questions which might be still open afterwards. I think there's a dinner today or something like that. And maybe we should close. The curtain falls, all the questions are open. And that's good for a research panel, I think, because we are researching for research questions. And I think we got a lot of new research questions on that panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Lots of food for thought during this day. Thank you so much to all of you for contributing to. I will shift.